Hello, everyone, and welcome to the introductory episode of the Black Sheep Tribune podcast. My name is Taylor Gideon, and I am your host, and here I will be covering true crime stories that you may have never heard of because everyone's story matters. For this first post, I just want to tell you a little bit about what inspired me to make the Black Sheep Tribune. But first, I just want to say that I hope everyone that's listening is having a good day and that everything's going all right for you. And if it's not, I hope it gets better for you sometime soon. I am so excited to be here recording my first introductory episode for the podcast. The podcast was something that I've thought about for a while, but there are just a few things that I wanted to do before I really jumped into a podcast. But I have a great setup here now in my house, little nice desk and mic and a new laptop and everything. And I finally got the software that I wanted for editing my audio and everything. I basically had to hack my computer to get the software that I wanted, but we got it. We're here, so it's all good now. So I've been a true crime fan for a while. Since I was a kid, I always watched true crime shows that would come on TV and that kind of thing. And now that we have Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and all that stuff, for the last, I don't know, couple years or even more than that, maybe, I've just been sitting around just watching true crime documentaries. It's just always been something that really interested me, and really always just caught my attention and something I could always just kind of get lost in on my time off and stuff like that. But I really hadn't thought about trying to write about or talk about or circulate true crime stories myself until I came across a documentary on, I think it was on Amazon at the time. I think it's still on Amazon, but I think it's on Hulu now too. But it is a documentary called The Tales of the Grim Sleeper, made by Nick Broomfield in 2014. That documentary is about a serial killer named Lonnie Franklin, and he was active in the South Los Angeles area from 1985 until about 2007. So that was the first thing that really stuck out to me because that's 25 years. And I just didn't think that things like this happened for that long. I didn't think that someone could just be out there victimizing women or victimizing anyone for that amount of time, basically uninterrupted. Franklin killed anywhere between 10 and 25 African American women between the ages of 14 and 37. Once he was arrested, it was rumored that the amount of women he killed could have been closer to about 100. Before Franklin was arrested for his string of murders, he accrued 15 different felony charges, including theft, assault, and battery. And according to Broomfield's documentary, even with these previous run-ins with the law, he somehow never had his DNA taken. The second thing that really surprised me and frustrated me about this case was that the LAPD knew that they had a serial killer in the area in 1987, which is only 2 years after Franklin was active. And they knew this because they found his third victim, Barbara Ware. This information and also a composite sketch of what the killer looked like and a picture of what his van looked like was not released to the press until 2008. So that's 21 years that they held on to what is, in my opinion, pertinent information. So again, it was just kind of why didn't you let these women know that they were being hunted? Because how else are they supposed to know if you don't tell them? Why was there no warning? Why wasn't this information released? The third thing that I thought was interesting, but also kind of sad about this case is that most, if not all, of Franklin's victims were African American women who were sex workers and crack cocaine addicts. And throughout the documentary, with all of the victims who lived through attacks at the hands of Franklin and other activists that are shown in the documentary, so many of them just said that no one cared about the things happening to these women because of who these women were, because they were Black sex workers and crack cocaine addicts. And that I just thought was really sad because I feel like even though these women were living like how people describe high risk lifestyles, like I don't think that that still means it's okay for them to be murdered and that we shouldn't pay attention when they go missing. Like there's still people and they still have families, and them being sex workers and crack cocaine addicts doesn't make them less than, at least not in my eyes. So when the victims would talk about not only their attacks and everything, but how I guess the city and the media was handling, or the police, I guess, were handling the case and everything, there was just this overwhelming sense that had this happened in like a white suburban area, things would not have gone down this way. I agree. I think that it would have been handled differently, and I think that's unfortunate. The last thing that really stuck out to me and made me really consider making like a true crime blog or a true crime podcast or something where I tried to circulate cases that don't get the media spotlight like other cases do and just don't get picked up by mainstream media, was near the end of this documentary, where one victim who survived an attack by Franklin, once she got near the end of telling her story, she said, "Yeah, I was out there, but that doesn't mean I'm nothing." So once I heard her say that, I was just like, someone needs to talk about this, or more people need to talk about this. Obviously, filmmakers like Nick Broomfield are obviously out here trying to, make it more known what happened in this particular case, at least. But I still didn't think it would be a bad idea just for me, like just a true crime fan, just to, put some effort into circulating stories like this and talking about stories like this and trying to like make it known why these stories are so important. So that's kind of where I got the idea to put the words Black Sheep in the title, because I wanted to talk about people who are so-called the black sheep of society, or on the outskirts of society, or just about cases that you're not going to hear about from your big mainstream media sources for whatever reason. May it be the victim's race, gender identity, sexual orientation, anything. And I realize that not every story is going to make big headlines. It just doesn't work that way. And it just, it would be insane for every single true crime story to make big headlines. Like, I understand that. But the problem that I have with it is when stories like this don't make headlines because of who the victims were. That bothers me. And I don't think that's all right. Because, one person killing 10 to 25 or even possibly even 100 women over a span of 25 years, like, what do you mean people don't want to hear about that? And even if they don't, I do, and I hope whoever is listening, I hope that you do too. The reason that I initially went with a blog and not a podcast is because I've always had a passion for writing, like even in school and stuff like that. And I've always felt like I put my ideas together better when I'm writing instead of when I'm trying to talk about it out loud and stuff. But I also, once I started researching cases and talking about more, or writing about more cases on the blog and stuff, I realized, it would be nice for people to have the option, because I understand not always wanting to read about true crime stories. Maybe you'd rather just listen to someone tell you about it. I totally get that, because I love true crime podcasts too. So, the more I did it, I was just like, it wouldn't be a bad idea to at least give people the option to listen to it or read about it. That being said, I am going to be covering the same cases that I've covered on the blog here on the podcast. So if you already keep up with the blog, it might be a little boring sometimes, and sorry about that. But I do at least want to go through and take notes again on like the cases that I've already done for the podcast post, so I can just be talking to you about them and not just like reading the blog post to you, because that would just be boring and monotone. So I don't want to do that. But In addition to that, I also want to do like an ongoing affairs kind of episode once a month on the podcast, just to have something else on here. So I basically want to make that like kind of like ongoing news, or like cases that are still in court, or there's something still going on with the case, basically. So I kind of want to do that at least once a month too. As far as the cases that I've covered on the blog and that I'm also going to be covering here, the podcast will always be a little bit behind the blog, just because I started the blog in September of 2019 and it's now March of 2020. So it's going to be a little bit behind. But I still think that I just still think it'd be a good idea to sit down and talk about them too. So I do want to talk a little bit about my posting schedule. If you've kept up with the blog, you have probably noticed that I post every first Friday of the month. I'm going to change that just a little bit. I'm going to start posting every first Sunday of the month on the blog. And then here on the podcast, I want to post an ongoing affairs episode every second Sunday of the month. And then every last Sunday of the month will be a podcast post of one of the cases I've already done on my blog. I do want to go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a preview for the first episode that's coming at the end of this month on the podcast. It'll be the first case that I covered on my blog, which is the case of Marsha P. Johnson. I really hope that you know that name better than I did when I first found this case. I found it when I was scrolling through Netflix and I saw the little picture for it, and I read the little bio or info screen, and it said that it was a true crime case about a transgender woman, and I thought that was really interesting. I thought it might be a good first case to cover there on the blog. And after watching the documentary and doing more of my own research and everything, it just really seemed like Marsha was just a really lovely and sweet and motherly person to a lot of people in the community that she lived in. And she was also just such a staple in the LGBTQ community. And I just also think that she did a lot, not just for that community, but for our country as a whole. And I really feel like what her and Sylvia Rivera and other activists did have really just helped us to get where we are. Not saying that where we are is perfect, but I do think hopefully that it's better. Marsha really didn't get much recognition while she was alive, or even like right after her death. She is now getting some of her overdue recognition from like the New York Times and other news sources. But when she was alive and right after she passed away, that really wasn't the case. So I still think it's important to talk about at least the true crime side of her story. Well, and all of her story. All of her story is so important. But also the true crime side of it, just because I feel like a lot of people still don't feel like they really don't know what happened to her. And I think that's really sad. And that probably, weighs in their minds a lot. And I wish that we could have that closure for them. But I don't think that we've really gotten there quite yet. But I hope that we can one day. Marsha was found floating in the Hudson River. And pretty much immediately her case was ruled a suicide. And if you're a true crime fan like I am, you probably know that once it's ruled a suicide, it's pretty much open and shut. That's it, But the people who knew her when she was alive and who spent time with her and that kind of thing really didn't think that that was something that she would do. They just didn't think that Marsha would do that. And even her best friend, Sylvia Rivera, always said that they had always told each other that they would cross that bridge together, which just really made me feel like if Marsha was really feeling like doing something like that, that maybe she would have told Sylvia. But I'll get into like all of the details of that on the episode coming at the end of the month. And I also want to go ahead and preview a ongoing affairs episode that I'm going to be posting in April, the second Sunday of April. And one of the cases I want to talk about in there, and also the case that I'm going to be covering on the blog on the first Sunday of April, is the case of Jada Kyle. First of all, I want to say that this case was brought to me by a friend named Emily. So thank you, Emily, for bringing me this case and always sending me evidence and talking about it with me and that kind of thing. Jada Kyle was a beautiful 3-year-old baby girl who unfortunately lost her life in December, of 2017. I don't want to get into it too much because I am covering it on the blog and on the podcast on the first Sunday of April and the second Sunday of April. But I did still want to kind of just put her in here and kind of mention her name because I just think that it's important to talk about that case. And I wanted to at least give you guys a little bit of a preview with Marcia and Jada. But other than that, I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by and listening to my introductory episode. Also, if you have a case that you think didn't get the proper recognition or you think needs to be circulated more or something like that, and you want me to talk about it or write about it, please feel free to email me at theblacksheeptribune@gmail.com. Also, you can follow me on basically anything. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. It's just the Black Sheep Tribune. But other than that, I hope that everyone has a great day or night wherever you happen to be right now. Please come back and visit soon to hear about the first Black Sheep Tribune case.